capitalize. That happens all the time.
Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Anthony DiGiovanni. We're going to be talking about cluelessness. That this arose when something came up on the EA forum about cluelessness. Anthony DiGiovanni, Anthony, thinks that we're sort of clueless, that there are lots of cases where we just can't forecast the expected value of some action, where there are actions that affect the future in large ways, and we're just totally in the dark about whether it makes things better or worse. Not that it's like 50-50, but that it's just we don't have a precise credence range over that. And I'm much more doubtful of that. So I thought we could, it would make some amount of sense to discuss that. So, Anthony, for those who don't know, who are you?
Yeah, well, ironically enough, my day job is at the Center on Long-Term Risk. So I am doing long-term
causing them or preventing them.
On, not for. So I do research on risks from AI in my day job, but am doing that part-time. Rest of that exploring what alternatives might make sense under cluelessness, and potentially working in something in animal welfare or earning to give for that because of cluelessness considerations. I'm sure we could get into how much sense that might make, but yeah, I last year, thanks to colleagues who were formerly at CLR, they prompted me to doubt precise Bayesianism, and further, to think that once we give up precise Bayesianism, the case for any given action being better or worse for aggregate welfare over the cosmos in expectation, that case is just breaks down, and I found that quite compelling, and I've been writing a lot about that ever since.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different places I get off the cluelessness train. So I think precise Bayesianism describes how an ideal reasoner would reason, but it doesn't describe how actual reasoners ought to reason. It's like if you attempt to, as a mere mortal, if you attempt to apply Bayes' theorem precisely to all sorts of beliefs, the odds are very good that you'll end up getting horribly lost, because we often don't have it very often is the case that we have a better sense of it's like, suppose that if there's some judgment A, and the probabilistic factors that go into A are like things B, C, D, E, F, G, H, etc. It's like you have a better just brute sense of the likelihood of A than you do of the likelihood of all these different factors that went into A, especially when you're multiplying them together. And so it's like these are hazy numbers that you don't have a great grasp on, and you're multiplying 12 of them together. That's just always a recipe for things going horribly wrong. So I don't think you need to have precise credences in every proposition or to be coherent. But I think that I don't think that we're totally in the dark. So, take an action like existential risk reduction, for instance. I think there are reasons to think that the future in expectation will be good. I'm not certain of this. The future might turn out to be bad, but it's like, I think the odds that the future are good are better than the odds that the future are bad. Part of this is just because people seem... It very often is the case that people are motivated to bring about things that are good, while people do not have motivations to bring about what's bad. Sometimes they bring about what's bad instrumentally in furtherance of their aims. But so then if we just extrapolate our technological capability to the limit, it's more plausible that we'll get a really, really good world than that we'll get a really, really bad world, especially because, it looks like we're going to be a lot wiser. And especially when you take into account the fact that if the world is... it's not extremely unlikely that we'll get a world consciously optimizing for value. It's very, very unlikely that we'll get a world consciously optimizing for disvalue. So if you think that value and that the worlds where we're consciously optimizing for value and disvalue have a really large share of the total value, because, you know, with just huge amounts of technological capabilities, we could bring about lots and lots of value or disvalue. Then it starts to look at an expectation. So, you know, one can certainly dispute some parts of that specific line of argument. But I don't see a reason to think that the arguments of this form are categorically illegitimate, that we just are totally in the dark about all these probabilities, that we can't make any sorts of probabilistic judgments. So why should we think this?
Yeah, a few things. So, I mean, just to make sure we're on the same page, like I think we can make some judgments that are probabilistic in the sense of like not being an interval of 0 to 1 for your credence and everything. There can be some non-trivial degrees of precision. I just think that like the degree of precision is imprecision to our credences is going to be severe enough that the expected values you get out of those credences, you know, some of them will be positive, some will be negative, and there's no kind of privileged basis on which we can aggregate these into like something that's positive or negative overall. By the way, would it help, like, you know, for listeners who are less familiar with the topic to like review imprecision more basically? Or I know you're pretty familiar with it, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, that seems like a good idea.
Cool. Yeah, so the imprecise probability model, which I should say I don't think is perfect, and has its, you know, flaws of its own that I can get to, but I claim that a step in the right direction from precise Bayesianism, or just like precise probabilities generally, is to represent your beliefs with a set of probability distributions. And then, you know, this will induce, you know, sets of probabilities for particular events or hypotheses. So when I say, you know, you have an interval credence in something, this is the set of precise probabilities induced by the set of precise probability distributions. And the kind of most straightforward way to generalize EV maximization to this case with imprecise probabilities is you compute the EV under each distribution in the set. And then you say, well, the whole reason I have this imprecision in the first place is that I feel it's like kind of arbitrary to pin down one particular distribution or to put precise weights on these distributions and kind of aggregate them into a distribution. If that's the case, if that's the motivation that led me to this in the first place, then plausibly I can't, without, on pain of arbitrariness, I can't do more than say A is better than B according to whatever measure of value I'm using, if its expected value is higher under all these distributions, or like strictly higher under one and equal, at least as good on the others. So that's the maximality rule. I might use that jargon later. That's the basic idea. Happy to maybe get back into your actual question if that sounds good.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what my question was.
Why should we be?
Oh, I think you did answer it. I think my question was something like, you know, so why think that we're in the dark about these things? And your answer was basically, well, if you think we have imprecise credences over things, then it just won't be true that on all the credence distributions things come out better.
Yes, and I think the interesting question is like, why do I think that? I think there's, you know, a couple levels of this. I'm relatively sympathetic to, you know, if we're taking a kind of, say, classical utilitarian axiology, I'm relatively sympathetic to saying that, like, we're not clueless that humans surviving existential risk and like colonizing space is an expectation better than like existential risk occurring. At least if you're comparing to like no one colonizes space after that. Maybe the question actually gets a bit thornier when we're comparing to some misaligned superintelligences. Yeah, I think several folks in AI safety have raised reasonable considerations about how I don't know, Claude seems like a better person than many people in some regards, and if you imagine people, you know, um, succeeding enough at keeping AI from going totally off the rails, but it's just overtakes us because it happens to disagree on values in some respects. Maybe that's better than human space colonization.
And the good news is that Scott Alexander recently proved beyond reasonable doubt that Claude is the Antichrist. And so, or that Anthropic is the Antichrist. And so, it's like really, the Claude shall inherit the earth. Did you see that?
I did not. Sorry.
It's a funny one. Yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm happy to get more into this point if you like, but if anything, maybe the deeper problem is cluelessness about the pathway between the concrete actions that we could take to try to reduce existential risk versus do we actually prevent existential risk?
Yeah, so sorry, again.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I have a question about imprecise credences. So I've always found myself somewhat puzzled about what's going on with imprecise credences. So there are different models of there are different ways for credences to work. There are objective credences, which are credences about the frequency of some event. So you might, if you think that a coin might be rigged, if you think 50% chance it's rigged to always come up heads, you think, the objective probability of it coming up heads, 50% chance it's 50%, and 50% chance it's 100%. So 50% chance that half the time it comes up heads, 50% chance that it always comes up heads. And then there's subjective credences, which is just like what your betting odds would be on a proposition. That if the stakes were really high, if you had to bet on the proposition, like at what odds would you bet on the proposition? But when my sense is that when people are talking about imprecise credences, what they're talking about is some kind of subjective probability, but that does not correspond to what odds they would in fact bet at. And so then I get lost. I don't know what's going on. So help me out here. What's going on with these imprecise credences?
Yeah. The perspective I take, I'm not sure like anyone who endorses imprecise credences is committed to this, but I think the most plausible answer to this is that degrees of belief are just a philosophical primitive. Like it's the degree of plausibility I assign to hypotheses, and these degrees can be imprecise or perhaps like vague. So I think that the kind of the fundamental thing here about credence is this degree of plausibility thing, and the betting odds operationalization of credences ends up kind of equivalent to that if you have precise credences. But there's no reason they need to be equivalent in general. The betting odds operationalization is kind of like the decision that is downstream of your beliefs, I would say.
So the idea is that you have degrees of belief. Your degrees of belief don't and that's what's primitive, and then your degrees of belief don't cash themselves out as precise credences. And so then it's like consistent with your degree of belief is a range of consistent probabilities. So like if my degree of belief in a proposition is I'm pretty sure of it, that's what's primitive, that's what my mental state is. And then being pretty sure of a proposition is consistent with any probability between like 70 and 90%, let's say. And so is that sort of the picture?
That's close to it. I don't really think of it as like consistency with precise probabilities. I think of it as more like, yeah, maybe this is just to restate the primitive thing, but uh, the plausibility of, you know, a statement like, I don't know, AI would kill all humans if it got to superintelligence. Um, there's just like some extent to which I find this hypothesis plausible, and I let's say like the imprecise credence I want to put on this is like 10% to 90%. Um, this one way maybe you could to help operationalize this, if this helps, is at least I'm more confident in AI, if it became super intelligent, would kill all humans than I don't know, like a 10. If I roll a 10-sided die, then it'll come up 1, and I'm less confident in this than, yeah, it would come up something other than 1. But other than that, I'm like, I don't have any further commitments to like the numbers in between.
Yeah, so I'll certainly agree. It's like in the human mind, I don't think that there's some like little compartment where you look under it and you get precise credences. It's like, there are all sorts of propositions where you'll think them through and be like, yeah, that might be right, that might not be right, and it's hard to pin down a number. But I guess I think you ought to pin down a number if you're making major decisions on the basis of it. So it's like it's not a big deal if you well, that's not always true. There are some cases where you don't need to know exactly what the number is to know that the number is sort of like high enough to make decisions. So, I think I don't know exactly what the probability of AI doom is, but I think it's pretty clear that it's high enough that work on AI alignment is quite valuable. But I guess it's like the fact that the human brain doesn't have like little credences written down, that's so consistent with it being reasonable to have credences on topics where you're making a big decision. And I mean, there are cases where you would have to give just imagine, it's like if we just imagine a high stakes case where you were asked to bet on the proposition, then you would have to pin down some probability. And so if you'd have to pin down some probability in that case, it's like, I don't see what's wrong with saying, well, whatever the like best probability is you would have in that case, after very carefully reflecting, that's the probability that you should use to influence your actions. So if in that case you would say, you'd say 15% odds AI dooms the world if you had to bet on it at some odds, then you should just act as you would, consistent with the AI spinning rolling a 100-sided die and then killing everyone if it comes up 1 through 15.
I mean, I think what I'd say is like, let's say I reflect on this for a long time, as you suggest, and this like 15% figure maybe like stands out to me as like something, if you gun to my head, if you force me to pick one number, let's say I go with that. I don't think this commits me to a 15% credence, all things considered. What it tells me is that if I'm forced to give a single number, this is what I'll do. But this choice might just itself be arbitrary. I'm curious, like, where you think the mandate to adopt this 15% credence comes from.
Well, so I generally think that there are multiple different rational credences that a person could maintain. It's like if you have a 15% credence in AI doom and I have an 18% credence, I don't think necessarily one of us is irrational. But I think the mandate comes from the fact that there are lots of very important decisions that we have to make in the world, and these will depend on what's true, and these will depend on the probability of things that's true. And so, in light of that, it seems to make sense to just as carefully as you can consider the reasons on both sides and try to figure out the odds that the things are true. Certainly, that will be an error-prone method, but I don't think that there's an alternative. And the other thing is, I think there are all sorts of sort of decision theoretic reasons why, if you don't apply this method, then you get to kind of like you get kind of horrible results where you violate dominance and so on.
Maybe we should get into that. I think, yeah, I'm unconvinced by those results. So, can you say which ones you have in mind exactly?
Yeah. So the one I find most persuasive, this was given by Casper Hare in some book. I think on the limits of kindness or something. I may be getting mixed up, but so the basic idea is this: let's imagine that you have the following three goods: A plus, and B. A and B are incommensurable. A plus and B are incommensurable, and A plus is better than B. So A plus is better than B. Both A plus and A are incommensurable with B. You can imagine that, like, let's say, A plus is you become a lawyer and you get an extra $1. A is you become a lawyer and you don't get an extra $1. And B is you become a doctor. So A plus is clearly better, but then there's enough imprecision between lawyer and doctor that A plus and B are A plus and A are both incommensurable with B. Okay, and then you're offered the following two lotteries. So a coin's going to be flipped. If you take the first lottery, if it comes up heads, you'll get A plus, and if it comes up tails, you'll get B. If you take the second lottery, if the coin comes up heads, you'll get B, and if it comes up tails, you'll get A. Okay, so lottery 1 is A plus if heads, B if tails. Lottery 2 is B if heads, A if tails. So I claim that if you have this set of credences in combination with certain very plausible probabilistic principles, you get a contradiction. So here are the principles. The first one is stochastic dominance. What stochastic dominance says is if you're comparing between two gambles, and one of them gives you an equal chance and one of them gives you for everything one of the gambles gives you, the other one gives you an equal chance of things that are as good or better than the first one, and for some of them it gives you a better chance, then it's better. So sorry, I didn't explain that very well. Like an example for stochastic dominance is like, if you give me a 50% chance of $1 and a 50% chance of nothing versus a 50% chance of $2 and a 50% chance of nothing, I'll take the second one because 50% chance of a better thing and 50% chance of an equal thing. And so it's like the probabilities of payouts on the second one are just all the same or higher, and for some of them they're higher. Okay. So stochastic dominance implies that the first gamble is better than the second. After all, it gives 1/2 chance of A plus versus a 1/2 chance of A, and then 1/2 chance of B versus a 1/2 chance of B. So it stochastically dominates the first one. The second principle is it's kind of a version of reflection. So it says that if you know that after learning the outcome of two lotteries, you won't have a preference between them, then you shouldn't have a preference now. If you know that after learning how they turn out, you'll regard them as incomparable, then you should regard them as incomparable now. The reason that this implies that the two lotteries are incomparable, not that the first one's better. The reason it implies this is that if the coin comes up heads, well, by taking the first lottery, you get A plus rather than B. Those are incommensurable. And if it comes up tails, you get B rather than A. And those are incommensurable. And so no matter what happens, it's incommensurable. So even though the first lottery dominates the second lottery, it's guaranteed that once you learn how the lotteries pay out, you won't have an all things considered preference between the two of them. You'll regard them as incomparable. And that seems very counterintuitive. Like, no, these both seem like really good principles, that this reflection principle and this dominance principle. So I give up incomparability.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I will say this is like one of the least bad objections to incomparability I'm aware of.
Thank you. I try to make the least bad objections to things.
And so for my part, I'm more inclined to keep stochastic dominance and I think it's not super bad to drop the reflection principle in this case.
Oh,
I think
you have,
mainly,
you have
yeah.
such great bullet biting ability. I could never bite such a bullet.
um, I mean, yeah. So I think like there's a comment that Jesse recently left on your post about this that I basically share his sentiment. Um, I think first of all, I have these incomplete preferences or incomparable preferences for reasons. I'm looking at um, what are the properties of these like possible outcomes, and what are my beliefs about them, um, and do I think I have any reason to prefer one over the other. Um, and if that's true, after reflecting on these components that go into these preferences really carefully, it seems a bit strange to say like you give me this argument about these two principles, um, and this is somehow supposed to change these preferences. Like, first of all, like which particular way should I change them seems arbitrary. But also, yeah, I think
Uh,
my inclination is that these preferences between pairs of prospects um, are more fundamental uh, than uh, at least this like reflection principle.
so are you? So there are arguments for transitive preferences where people point out that if you have intransitive preferences, that violates dominance and that exposes you to money pumps. Do you find those arguments to be methodologically suspect?
Um, at least the money pump arguments I do think are methodologically suspect.
Okay, what about the dominance ones?
I'm less familiar with how those work in the transitivity case.
The way that the dominance arguments
Yeah.
work is if there are three goods A, B, C, and you prefer A to B, B to C, and C to A, then if you compare A, B to B, C, then both of them dominate the other. So A is better than B and B is better than C, but C is better than A and B is better than C. So depending on how you order them for the comparison, you get what dominance in each way. Now,
Um, Go on.
I'll say so. I think this is a good argument against intransitive preferences, and um, and I think this is a good argument, even though it doesn't tell you if you have intransitive preferences which of the ones to drop. And the other thing is that, sorry, and I should
I
say,
think that's somewhat fair. Like to be clear, I think I'm not. Yeah, and on hindsight, I think the like question of like how exactly should you resolve all of this is like not as important as the like I have these preferences for reasons, and it seems fine if like, I do think the reasons for them are stronger than my reasons for endorsing this difference principle.
yeah, and
But go
I
on.
should say, let me describe what I take to be the kind of like takeaway from these kinds of arguments. Oh, and sorry, and sorry, remind me if I forget because I have an objection that I thought of to just giving up the reflection thing that I think this seems kind of strong. But so uh uh so what I take to be the upside of this is not that like you have to like no doubt in practice, nearly all of us have intransitive preferences. And I don't think we need to like work super hard to rid ourselves of intransitive preferences. But I think what this shows is that something rationally off is going on when you have intransitive preferences, like when you have incomplete preferences. And so I think then the takeaway should be that it's like if you're making it's like it's not a big deal to iron them out in ordinary life. But if you're making really, really high stakes decisions, like if you're deciding if you're deciding what goods to optimize in the universe, and you are doing this on the basis of intransitive values, then I would think, something's off about this because, um, uh, your values they're all off. If you want to respond to that, feel free to. But if not, I want to raise an objection to the way you went in response to my argument for completeness.
Yeah. Maybe this is like a super minor point, but just to clarify, I haven't gone off the deep end too much. I do think like intransitivity for value, like in axiology is like really rough, or is just conceptually incoherent to me personally. I think I'm much more sympathetic to it with preferences, where preferences are just like expressions of like relative choice worthiness between pairs of options at a time. But anyway, I think this is a bit of a side point, but maybe the second point I mentioned will come up more generally later.
Yeah, so here's an objection to giving up um, giving up the kind of like reflection principle. So imagine you're in this scenario. You're in the scenario with the previous lottery where, you know, heads A plus, tails B, versus with the second lottery, heads B, tails A. And there are two, so it's gonna be like the Sleeping Beauty problem. So you're gonna be put to sleep and woken up on two separate occasions. The first one is before the lottery terminates, and the second one is after the lottery terminates. Before the lottery terminates, your preferences between the two of them are presumably incomparable. Before the lottery terminates, you think the first lottery is better than the second one, right? Because it just dominates it. After the lottery terminates, here's what I think is a little bit sus. So you know how the lottery has turned out. So you know that as a result, sorry. Let me just well, we don't need to have that. You don't know how the lottery has turned out, but you know it has turned out some way. And so after the lottery terminates, when you're woken up a second time, you must have the following judgment. I know that the way the lottery turned out, I am indifferent between which lottery I took. But then it seems like, sorry, I'm explaining this poorly, but I have the following two ideas. The first one is that your credence state in the second state, you should think that the lottery is in the second state you should be indifferent between the two of them, because you know that the lottery turned out some way, and how it turned out, you know that you're indifferent between how it turned out given lottery, given the first lottery versus given the second lottery. And then my second thought is that your judgments should be the same in the second state as in the first state. After all, the only difference between the second state and the first state is not in terms of any information you have. It's only in terms of when they are located in time. It's just like one of them is later than the other. And it seems like, so then it's, so I guess, yeah, I'd be curious to know, well, first of all, have you been able to get what I was saying from my mangled explanation? And if so, what do you think your credences should be in the state 2?
Credences over what exactly?
Sorry, not credences. What should be your preference ranking? Should you think that they're incomparable, or that the first one's better? Stage 2 is, remember, after you know how that the lotteries have turned out, like the coin's already been flipped, but you haven't seen how it turned out.
I see. Yeah, it does seem, like they should be incomparable. That seems right. Yeah, I'm not sure if this does anything for me intuitively beyond the original case.
Wait, so you accept that in this case it should be incomparable, your ranking? Do you accept that? Do you at least share the intuition that you're ranking between state 1 and state 2, where the only difference between them is basically like 5 minutes have passed, and so the coin's been flipped, even though you have no information about how it turned out? Do you share the intuition that your preference ordering should be the same between those two cases?
Maybe I'm still misunderstanding the setup here, because it seems that after the second awakening, like your epistemic state with respect to the two lotteries is symmetric because you don't know which one you've picked. Yeah, sorry. Can you repeat the setup again just to make sure?
Sorry. So yeah. So there are two stages. Stage one is the experiment hasn't been done yet, and the experiment is flipping a coin, having the outcomes described. And so in stage one, you say that you should prefer gamble one to gamble two, because it dominates gamble two. And then the coin is flipped. You don't witness the coin being flipped. It's like in a different room or whatever. And then you enter stage two, where now you're asked what your credence distribution is over the scenarios. Sorry, not credence distribution. What am I saying? You're asked what your evaluation is between the scenarios. And so here's my thoughts about this scenario too.
Sorry, the preferences between. Sorry, this is pedantic. Just like make sure I understand.
The preferences over the between the two lotteries is what I'm saying.
Sorry, as in like this would be equivalent to like the payout you get given what the coin flip is.
It doesn't matter if the payout like accrues to you or whatever, but it's the lotteries are lotteries over states of affairs, and then it's your preference over between the lotteries that have probabilities over the states of affairs.
Sorry, maybe now I'm still unsure why the claim is that now the preferences should be incomparable. Like
the idea is now you know that the lottery has turned out some way, so that it isn't.
So it's not the lottery itself your preferences over. It's the
right. The following seems like a kind of incoherent mental state. Or not incoherent, but like the kind of mental state you shouldn't have, which is, I prefer lottery A over lottery B, but currently, given what I know about how lottery A turned out, sorry, let me be precise. The mental state that seems irrational is to think, I prefer lottery A to lottery B, even though I don't prefer how lottery A turned out to lottery B, and I have no information about how lottery A turned out relative to lottery B. It's like, if you know that how it turned out was to make, if you know that like whichever lottery was taken, given that it was taken, your preferences between that lottery and the other one are incomparable. It seems incoherent to have that view, to have the view that whichever lottery is taken, you don't in fact care whether it was taken versus the other one, but then to also think that you do prefer the lottery that dominates the other. It's like here's we can just imagine picking a term for let S designate however the lottery that was taken turned out. It seems incoherent to say, or let's just imagine you took lottery, the first lottery, the one with A plus. It seems incoherent to say that if you allow S to designate the outcome from lottery A plus, it seems incoherent to say that that though I have no specific information about what S is, I prefer lottery. Though I have no specific information about how the first lottery turned out relative to the second one, I prefer the first lottery sorry. Sorry, I'm explaining this very poorly, but are you sort of seeing the picture of why it's weird to think that even though you know that how the lottery A plus turned out, you're indifferent between it and how the other lottery turned out. That it's weird to think that alongside having a preference for A plus for the first lottery over the second one.
I definitely agree it's weird. I think about this. Yeah, part of me is inclined like to appeal to some, I don't know, companions in guilt here with cases in infinite ethics or the like, where you have to pick your poison among very compelling principles. But I think this is like somewhat intuition jousting, and maybe isn't so compelling.
Sorry, so I just which of the so in the case in stage 2 of the scenario, after the experiment's been done, in this case, which one are you tempted to say? Are you tempted to say that you prefer A plus, the first lottery to the second, or to say that they're incomparable?
I think if my epistemic state is indeed exactly the same, then it seems more compelling to say that the lottery with A plus is preferable.
Okay, so you say that in right, okay. But then I guess it seems weird that just waiting 5 minutes will change your preference ordering. That it's just like the experiment is done in a different room and you have no information about how it turns out. But if you wait 5 minutes, then your preferences change from preferring lottery 1 to not preferring lottery 1.
Sorry, maybe I've still misunderstood, because I'm saying so in the second awakening, is the claim that I still haven't I don't know what has been chosen. This does seem like epistemically equivalent to like I haven't made my choice yet.
Yeah, sorry.
In that case, I do.
When you ask what's been chosen, are you asking about the outcome of the lottery, or are you asking about which of the two lotteries was chosen? Like, are you asking about the outcome of the coin flip, or are you asking whether you picked lottery 1 or lottery
2? The second thing.
We can just stipulate from the outset that at every point you know that lottery 1 was picked, and then we're just asking like, oh, are you happy that lottery 1 was picked?
But so I don't know the outcome of the coin flip. I just know that it has resolved.
Yeah.
In that case, yeah. So my preference hasn't changed then, right? Like I'm saying that I do still maintain that the first.
Wait. So my thought
Maybe.
is this: the following seems like irrational. It seems irrational to say I prefer lottery 1 to lottery 2, but I don't prefer how lottery 1 turned out to how lottery 2 turned out. If you the time at which you're making that judgment is after it turned out the way that it did. So it seems incoherent to say that you prefer one lottery to another one, but you don't prefer how that lottery turned out relative to the other one. If you're making that judgment after it turned out whichever way it did.
But I don't think so maybe I'm still puzzled as where we disagree, because I agree the passage of time doesn't seem to make a difference. And that's kind of why I would say if after the first awakening I'm still uncertain of the outcome of the coin flip, my epistemic state is exactly the same.
Right. But so before it's the outcome, you prefer the first lottery to the second one, right?
Yes.
And then after it, you still prefer the first lottery to the second one?
I think so, as far as I
Right.
understand
Okay.
the case.
So then you're saying that you prefer lottery 1 to lottery 2, even though you know that how lottery 1 turned out, you don't prefer it to how lottery 2 would have turned out.
Right. I do think. I guess maybe I'm not sure how this is. Like, is this meant to pump the intuition more than just the original statement of the case? Because as I say, my epistemic state hasn't changed.
Yeah, I guess the
over the
original
time.
case like involved a principle kind of like reflection. And
Mhm.
there are lots of people who, for bad reasons, I think, they don't feel that good about reflection. They say, yeah, maybe your credences can change in some cases. But so here I'm saying it seems especially weird when you know how the lottery has turned out to both think that you prefer the first lottery to the second one, but you know that given how it turned out, you don't prefer it to the second one. Like uh just imagine this in a non-lottery case without incomparability, where you're like,
Mhm.
uh, I prefer you giving me A rather than B, but I don't prefer how you giving me A rather than B turned out. Assuming that assuming that when you say that you prefer A to B, you're referring to specifically given the way it's that's likely to have turned out. That.
Hmm.
Well, yeah.
I guess I'm just not that troubled if how things turn out in a decision making under uncertainty uh ends up with with the property like this. Like in the case where there's no uncertainty, I'm not sure when um these when someone with incomplete preferences would ever um say something as wacky as what you just suggested.
Sorry. So the thing that I just said, so it makes perfect sense to say the following. Like, I would have liked for I like people getting me cake on my birthday, but I don't prefer how you getting me cake on my birthday turned out because it involved you lacing it with rat poison or something. That's a perfectly coherent thing to say. But that's because in that case you're using giving you cake on your birthday as a broad category to refer to a class of actions. What it doesn't make sense to say is that there's some specific uncertainty, that there's some specific lottery over how things might turn out, and you don't have any preference with regards, and you know, um, and you currently are evaluating your preferences between the two of them, and you say that you have a preference for one of them, but you don't have a preference. You have a preference for A over B, but you don't have a preference for how A turned out relative to how B turned out. That is not a mental state that you should have at any time. Like in the birthday case, cake case, it would not make sense to say, I am happy that you got me cake on my birthday, but I'm not happy about how it turned out that you got me cake on my birthday. If getting you cake on your birthday just refers to the way in which they did it. So it's like you can't have the preference. It shouldn't be that there's some lottery where there's uncertainty across the lottery, and you know that how in fact it turns out you have no preference between the two lotteries, but that you nonetheless do have a preference for one of the lotteries. Like that, it's not quite a contradiction, but it's getting very close.
Hmm. There's some intuition bumps here. How? So I understand you're very unsympathetic to functional decision theory, as am I. But what do you think of just like Newcomb's problem, like one boxing versus two boxing?
I'm a two boxer.
Okay, so this intuition bump will not work.
Oh, we have another argument
Yeah.
for two bucks.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem. I mean, yeah, I think it does seem perfectly natural to me to say, you know, holding a state of the world fixed, some action would be better, and this is true for all these states. But under your uncertainty, um, and the way your actions are correlated with states of the world, um, you should violate that kind of state-wise dominant principle.
It's like it doesn't seem coherent. There's some very specific event to say that in light of what I know now about how it turned out, whatever you know about how it turned out, I have no preference between these two actions, but I have a preference between the two lotteries. And it's not just like a brute preference before you learn how it turns out. It's a preference taking into account your knowledge of how it turns out.
I'm not sure I understand that part. Like you're the taking into account your knowledge of how it turns out part. Like the preference is over the lotteries, and you just don't know how it's turned out.
Well, no, I'm saying, given how much information, you know with certainty the following. Given how the lottery turned out, you don't care whether lottery 1 or lottery 2 was taken.
Mm-hmm.
So you both think, given how the lottery turned out, I don't care whether the first lottery or the second one was taken. But nonetheless, I really wish the first lottery was taken rather than the second one. And that doesn't seem like you're in a mental state. Maybe you don't share the intuition pump. And I think I've done an extraordinarily bad job of explaining it. In part because it's sort of hard to state the principle. But I guess the thing I wanted this to do was like to not require like a kind of reflection principle where it doesn't require anything about how your credences change over time. It just requires something about your credences at a specific time, where you shouldn't say that, given my uncertainty about this thing, you shouldn't say the thing I've described, that you prefer A to B, but you don't prefer how A turned out to how B turned out.
Yeah. Gotcha. I mean, that helps me see what the purpose of the second case is. I do think it would be worth me probing if there's a kind of more satisfying response to this. Other than, I mean, I do still think that the fact that I arrived at the incomplete preferences for reasons that seem perfectly coherent, I do think that also just like counts for a lot and makes me, I feel less like here are these two super compelling principles and this other thing that's kind of like easily droppable, and more like three super compelling things on the table. And I admittedly, I like in some ways feel confused about how bad it is to drop the deference or reflection principle here. But I guess I'm like somewhat used to that in the domain of like in axiology, in decision theory.
I guess so. Well. Yeah. I'll confess that I never had remotely incomparable intuitions. In fact, like like there's a sort of funny story when I was like 10 of like it just seeming like if you really had no preference, it just seeming clear to me that if you really had no preference between two very large decisions, then you would make it on like totally trivial grounds. So my thought is like I never really had the incomparability intuitions. It seems very strange that you would have two things A and B and A plus, and you prefer A plus to A, but then B you neither they're both you're sort of incomparable with respect to B. So it's like you have no preference between A and B, then A gets a little bit better, and then you still have no preference between A and B. That seems weird. And then it's like, so I never had the intuition to begin with, and then it leads to all these horrendous. It like requires us to give up reflection. It requires us to give up even more modest principles than reflection, versions of reflection that are just like basically reflection at a time, where it's like the sort of principle that I was describing earlier. Then it also leads maybe to I think I'm not sure if your version of incomparability will lead to nihilism. in the way that I described in my article. I think you only get that if you think that there are specific goods in the world that are incomparable, rather than having like imprecise credences over things.
My view is that, with respect to like impartially consequentialist axiologies, with respect, to that axiology plus the kind of maximality rule I was describing, rather than some other alternative decision theories we might get into, or one particular I have in mind, but with this kind of generalization of EV to the imprecise case, plus an impartial axiology, you get like nihilism with respect to that axiology, because I do think that the whole cosmos like is just extremely weird, and infects the imprecise EV of anything. I think this doesn't lead to nihilism, all things considered, because we have other normative grounds to act on besides these axiologies. Even if I do find like impartial consequentialism like by far much more compelling than many other either moral views or sorry, the sentence is a bit muddled. So I find impartial consequentialism much more compelling than other moral views. I find this maximality rule more compelling than other alternatives that are on the table I'm aware of, but it's not.
I don't think that being a non-consequentialist helps you get out of these sorts of worries. For the following reason, the reason that, so I think that any plausible view that's non-consequentialist will hold that consequences are among the things that matter. So let's say, let me just sketch the basic contours of the challenge. So the challenge is like, let's say I'm deciding whether to save someone's life, for example. Well, my saving their life will affect the world in lots of ways. It will result in many different people being replaced with other people who, let's just start with a simple case, me like driving to the store. You might think, well, it's good to drive to the store if I have a reason to do so, but it'll end up affecting the world in lots of ways. It'll end up changing the identities of lots of people with whom they're incomparable. And so then you end up getting lots of incomparability. And then the idea of incomparability is like, if there are two incomparable goods, A and B, in order to justify bringing that A rather than B, in order for it to be better to bring that A rather than B, you'll need another very large good. So it's like, if there are two incomparable careers you're deciding between, and then someone offers you a $1 raise if you take the first one, you shouldn't be like, oh, I'll take that one, because no, they're still incomparable. Incomparability comes from the impossibility, the difficulty of doing a precise comparison, not from the fact that they're exactly equal. And so then it's like, well, so you're swapping out lots of goods with lots of other goods and bringing about a slight benefit, but the entire nature of incomparability is that it can't be compensated by slight benefit. And then the further idea is that because you affect so many incomparable goods, this ends up just swamping the first order consequentialist effects of things. So even like saving 100 people's lives, you'll affect like in the limit, like quadrillion, many billions of people just in the next, 100 years, you'll affect whether they end up coming to exist. And so that sort of vast ocean of incomparability ends up swamping the first order effects. And per incomparable good that you replace, it ends up being the first order effects, the expected effect ends up being very small. So that's the basic idea of the challenge. Now your thought is like, well, even if this infects consequentialism, there are non-consequentialist reasons to act. But I think that the reason why the problem here is not that the incomparable goods, it would be one thing if this established a certain kind of nihilism, that you just had no consequentialist reasons. And then if it did that, then you could say, well, maybe you have other reasons, and so those give your reasons to act. But the idea here isn't that it isn't that you have no reasons to act. It's that you have reasons to act that aren't precise. That you have this like sort of ocean of messiness of incomparability that swamps the other reasons to act. And my thought is it will also swamp the consequentialist reasons. The way to see this is this. Consider an action that you think I have non-consequentialist reasons to take. Like, let's say calling my mother. now imagine, so calling my mother will, your thought is, well, consequentialist reasons are neutral. It's like, it would be a good thing to do because I have non-consequentialist reasons to do it. But now imagine a second act, which I have no non-consequentialist reasons to do, but which I have strong consequentialist reasons to do. So maybe just like saving 100 people's lives, creating 100 people, something along these lines, and stipulate that it has all the same second order effects of calling my mother. So all the people who would have come to exist if I called my mother will also come to exist if I took this action. In this case, it seems clear that this action is better than calling my mother. After all, it has the same second order effects, and the first order effects are just saving 100 people rather than calling my mother. It's better. Calling one's mother is a good thing, but saving 100 people's lives is better. So my thought is this action is clearly better than the action of just calling my mother. And then my thought is, well, but this action, as the argument establishes, is neither good nor bad. And so if calling my mother is worse than an argument that's neither good nor bad, than an action that's neither good nor bad, then it itself would be neither good nor bad.
Well, I think it's important to separate like from what perspective you're evaluating things. So if we're using goodness here to mean like consequentialist goodness, then I would agree that if all the second order effects are exactly the same, then the saving 100 lives is better than calling your mother. But that doesn't mean that like the all things considered choiceworthiness is better, because sorry, let me step back. Never mind. I think I'm happy to say, sorry, in this case, if there is truly like exactly the same second order effects, then even if saving 100 lives, has incomparable expected impact, or sorry, incomparable with doing nothing, it can still be better than calling your mother, even on a consequentialist grounds. But I'm not sure whether that like contradicts the claim that each of these actions are incomparable with doing nothing, say.
Sorry, I was thinking that. Sorry, were you suggesting that calling my mother is incomparable with doing nothing?
From a consequentialist perspective, yes.
So I'm not talking about from a consequentialist perspective. I'm just talking about all things considered choice-worthiness. I'm talking about which one you should take. And so my thought is that if the argument is right, it establishes that saving 100 lives is incomparable with doing nothing. But then saving 100 lives and having all the same second order effects as calling my mother is better than calling my mother. If I had to choose between those two, I should save the 100 lives. And so therefore, from those two, it follows that saving 100 lives is better in terms of all things considered choice-worthiness. That calling my mother will just be incomparable with doing nothing. It'll be undefined in terms of its all things considered choice-worthiness, not just like undefined in a consequentialist sense.
Yeah, I think so. I disagree with that step. So my perspective here is, when we're making the all things considered choice, we have multiple normative views we're bringing to bear. One of which is the consequentialist one. Another is, admittedly, I don't have a precise formulation of like what non-sequentialist.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't exactly clear on which step you said you were disagreeing with.
The claim that all things considered, calling your mother is incomparable with doing nothing.
Sorry, that was sort of the conclusion of the argument. The two steps are calling your mother is less good than saving 100 lives and having the same second order effects. Saving 100 lives and having the same second order effects is, if the basic argument's right, is incomparable with doing nothing. And then the idea is that if something is less good than something that's incomparable with doing nothing, then the action is not good. So it's either bad, neutral, or incomparable with doing nothing. Then the idea is it's not bad or neutral, so it's incomparable with doing nothing. I can like write out the premises if that would be helpful in the side chat.
I think yeah, that would be. Thanks. or maybe just like typing to myself how I think the decision rule I have in mind would handle this.
Yeah. Okay, I put it in the private chat. Oh no, it mangled the formatting, but that's very sad. The why I can repaste it with better formatting.
It's okay.
Oh my. Okay, apparently it just hates formatting. Well, sorry. I'm
That's
sorry
okay.
that StreamYard hates the good and the lights and wickedness.
No worries. So, sorry, bear with me as I think,
yeah, no worries. Yeah, feel free to take
it.
it.
Mind, it's like, you kind of look at maybe so. I should just describe how this is meant to work in generality. So for just two actions in isolation, you look at how each normative view compares them, and it takes a bit to like make this fully precise in a general case. But in this case, you would just say, if according to one view, A is more trustworthy than B, and according to the other, they're incomparably trustworthy, then we have this like, or kind of metanormative relation prefers A over B. Just in this like binary choice for now.
Right. So the idea is sort of like you ignore the theories on which they're incomparable, and then just look at what's said on the theories on which one's better than the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
It gets a little more complicated when there's multiple views to aggregate. You can kind of aggregate them as far as you can with sort of intertheoretic comparisons. But in any case,
no, I think a view like that will have some somewhat serious problems. But I guess this argument is just establishing that any view on which there's incomparability is wrong. And so if you think that, or they all imply that our actions have an expected value. And so then you should just bracket out. If you use the bracketing rule, then you just bracket out all the views on which there is any incomparability. Now, as it happens, I think this might also pose an objection to like higher order incomparability on the bracketing rule. But yeah, so I'd be curious. So I can just sort of say the premises for the audience. I mean, now I doubt that there are many people who are this is sufficiently technical that I think most people will have stopped watching. Not that this is in the recording, but so the premises are, the first one says calling your mother is less good than saving 100 lives, assuming the same second order effects. The second premise says saving 100 lives is incomparable with doing nothing, if the basic argument works. The third one says if some act is worse than an action incomparable with doing nothing, I wrote argument, but meant action, incomparable with doing nothing, then it's not a good thing. And then 4 is, so if the basic argument works, calling your mother is not a good thing to do. And so then that would establish that basically like incomparability leads to nihilism. Not just about consequentialist reasons, but about non-consequentialist reasons too, because, and I think we can see sort of a theoretical diagnosis of why this is, which is that the way that it implies incomparability isn't that your reasons are exactly equal on each side. It just implies that there are massive reasons to do it and not to do it. And so then it's like, well, the little bit of extra non-consequentialist reasons against this massive incomparable waves of reasons, those won't necessarily be decisive. It's just sort of a drop in the ocean on either side.
I mean, I definitely, so I agree that within a given normative view, like on its own terms, yeah, you have this kind of adding, mildly sweetening a one thing that's incomparable to another is not going to be a tiebreaker. I think the intuition I'm appealing to here is that we don't just have this like pile of reasons for and against things provided by the different normative views, and that's it. I think it's the fact that different normative views give different kind of packages of reasons is like relevant to our decision making. Like the fact that the consequentialist view as a whole doesn't give me a reason for to choose like one over the other should mean that like in my kind of decision making under normative uncertainty, I treat the consequentialist perspective as abstaining, like not, it doesn't like vote for anything, or treats both options as permissible. It's not that I'm like you know, putting the good to the your mother in this case onto the pile of like all these goods throughout the cosmos.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm saying right. So if you go that way, I'm just saying that I don't think that that it'll help with the basic puzzle for incomparability. Where what I'm saying, it's like if you say, well, the view just is like I think it's not so clear exactly where where your view would get off the boat. Maybe it would get off the boat at premise 1, where it would just say, well, you bracket out the consequential. You say consequentialism abstains, so you just say no. Calling your mother is better than saving 100 lives, because basically, consequentialism is sitting out, so you're only taking into account the non-consequentialist reasons. But then that seems like an extremely bad result, and certainly that seems like a much worse result. It's like if incomparability, it's like it starts out controversial, and there are strong philosophical arguments against it, and then it implies that nothing we do matters in a consequentialist sense. So nothing we do makes things better or worse. We have no consequentialist reasons to perform any action, and that it's better to call your mother than to save 100 lives. I think at that point it's like, okay, we should have long since have abandoned incomparability.
Wait, sorry. So I understand the setup. The second order effects of calling your mother and saving 100 lives here are exactly the same?
Yes.
Okay, in that case, then
and sorry, when I say second order effects, I don't mean the effects like on the people you save. I just mean like the effects on like changing around people's identities or whatever. So we could imagine that like you calling your mother and you saving the 100 people, like these are all sort of like relegated to some void in outer space, and their only effect will be on they'll both result in like some button being pressed that transmits a signal to Earth, and that'll be where all the second order effects come from, and so it'll be the same in that respect.
Right. So okay, so in that case, from the consequentialist perspective, calling your mother is worse than saving the 100. And yeah, so then I would say overall calling your mother is less like choice worthy than saving the 100 by this rule. Now, sorry, maybe so I can follow like where in your argument is supposed to. Sorry, is the counterintuitive thing supposed to be that calling your mother is not more choice worthy than doing nothing?
What I'm trying to illustrate, the upshot of the argument is, so it sounded like what you were suggesting was that incomparability infects consequentialist reasons, so that the consequentialists, you can just ignore the consequentialist reasons and then act for only non-consequentialist reasons. And I'm saying that if you think that incomparability infects consequentialist reasons, I think it also non-consequentialist reasons. This will imply that a paradigm act like calling your mother, which you do for non-consequentialist reasons, maybe also partly for consequentialist reasons, but you have non-consequentialist reasons to do, that this, if the basic argument for incomparability infecting consequentialism goes through, it will also infect this kind of non-consequentialist idea. And the kind of like basic way to think about the argument is just for any non-consequentialist effect that an action has, you can imagine a better consequentialist effect that the action has. And then the argument establishes that the action with the better consequentialist effect would be incomparable. And so then if with the non-consequentialist effect, it would also be incomparable.
Right. Sorry. I think let me just work this through with how the decision rule I have in mind is supposed to work. So just like for each pair of actions, and then see where this might, or how this squares with your argument. So I think that's where I'm getting a bit confused. Okay, so comparing call your mother to do nothing, we say like let's say like non-consequentialist is view is V1, the consequentialist one is V2. V1 prefers calling your mother over doing nothing. They're incomparable with respect to V2. Overall, we prefer calling your mother to doing nothing. Okay, doing nothing versus saving 100. Yeah, maybe we can stipulate that there's like, I don't know, there's some non-consequentialist virtue to trying to save the 100 here too. In which case, we get that.
I was trying to imagine that the saving 100 lives, I was just trying to give that as an example of an act you do only for consequentialist reasons. We could imagine some different act. So we could imagine that the way in which you do it you have to do it in a way that's like a little cowardly or something to offset. But the point is just, I'm imagining that this is an act that you take for only consequentialist reasons.
Gotcha. Okay, then I'm happy to say, yeah. So this is incomparable under both views, let's say. Sorry, the doing nothing and saving 100 are incomparable under both views. So we don't have a preference between them. And for calling your mother versus saving the 100, it's better under consequentialism. And plausibly, like this outweighs the extent to which it maybe calling your mother is better on the non-consequentialist sense. So we at least, okay, so we don't get any, so our overall preferences here are, we prefer calling your mother to do nothing. We prefer saving 100 to calling the mother. But yeah, saving 100 is incomparable with doing nothing. Now, can you repeat what the objectionable part is here?
Sorry. So, what I'm suggesting is that I'm trying to argue that incomparability implies nihilism. Implies that no actions are better than any other actions. And so it sounded like you agree that incomparability implies nihilism about consequentialist reasons. So it implies that no
Yes.
actions have better consequences than other ones. And so I was trying to establish that if you think it infects consequentialist reasons, it will also infect non-consequentialist reasons in the same way. And so that's a conclusion. I was just calling your mother as an example of an action that you take for non-consequentialist reasons.
Right, but I guess I'm not sure. Like, what about my reasoning you're rejecting? Like, when you say that this infects the non-consequentialist reason, like, my reasoning, to recap, was that there's this particular structure to our overall set of reasons. We have each first order normative theory kind of weighs up reasons for and against options and gets its first order verdict of how it compares the options, if at all. And then we get our overall choice from the verdicts of these views. And so
Yeah. I don't. My argument, it's a more general argument against for incomparability implying nihilism. Now, if you're asking, well, where does it address your way of doing reasoning under incomparability? I don't think your way is like, I don't know exactly where you'd get off the boat, but basically your way will require giving up one of the four principles. But then the four principles all seem very obvious. The second principle, at least it seems obvious once you grant that saving 100 lives doesn't make things better, that it, that incomparability infects consequentialist reasons. So I'm just where it would address what you say would just depend on exactly which of the premises you want to give up. My sense, like if I had to bet, I'd say it seems like where your view would which premise it would give up is
like number 3
is the sorry what
it looks. I guess it would have to be number 3. Wait a minute. So sorry, by worse here, are you is this like
talking about all things considered choice-worthiness?
Okay. Some act is less choice-worthy, all things considered, than something incomparable with doing nothing. Then it should also be does this mean it should also be incomparable with doing nothing? Or not? It should not be preferable to doing nothing?
Sorry, you're asking about 3. You cut out a bit as you were asking the question. Yeah. So what 3 says is if some act is worse than an action incomparable with doing nothing, then the act is not a good thing to do. So the idea is that if it's incomparable with doing nothing, then it's no better than doing nothing. So the idea is, well, if it's no better than doing nothing.
Oh, sorry. I think you maybe cut out.
Oh, no. Sorry. So the idea of the third premise is that if some act is worse than other act, and that other act is incomparable with doing nothing, then the act is not a good thing to do. So it's like, if doing nothing is...
Can I just ask, like, when you say not a good thing to do, you mean it's not more choice-worthy than doing nothing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I do reject this step then.
Okay. Yeah, I guess... So that step, it does seem very plausible to me. It's like, if doing nothing is... Like it seems weird to think, like, this act is... If there are 3 acts, A, B, and C, C is doing nothing, and then B is incomparable with doing nothing, and A is worse than B. It seems weird to say that the act... well, I now forget the variables I just assigned to this, but it seems weird to say...
So I'm using A for call your mother, B for do nothing, and C for saving 100.
Okay, I'm gonna write that out. Okay, A
Sense.
equals call
That would be
your
helpful.
mother. B equals save 100.
It was B equals do nothing, but yeah.
Oh, sorry. B equals nothing. C equals save 100. It seems weird to me that you'd have C be better than A. B is no better than C, but um uh um sorry. C is better than A. B and C are incomparable, but then A is better than B? That seems strange.
Yeah.
Like, I think this
Right,
will require giving up transitivity.
Oh yeah, so maybe I should have front-loaded this. I think, and this comes back to my response when you're a while back when you were talking about money pumps and dominance and transitivity. I think intransitivity with value is pretty bonkers, but with choice worthiness, it seems a lot more plausible to me, in that or when I'm just like looking at two pairs of things in isolation, maybe I prefer one to the other because of like one dimension preferring one to the other. And I'm comparing another pair of things, and this other B is like preferable to C according to some other dimension. It does seem not too implausible to me that you will get intransitivities in the pairwise comparisons of these things, but that doesn't commit you to some particular verdicts about like how you choose like when all three things are on the table. Yeah, sorry if I maybe explained that poorly. I think
sorry, so can I describe why so I don't I find transitivity to be very plausible for both. I think for like limited agents, it's fine to have intransitive preferences just because we're not ideal. But I certainly think an ideal agent should have transitive preferences. Can I just describe why I think there's something so weird about this principle? So about this preference ordering. So imagine you're like, so you're currently on track to call your mother, and you're excited. You're like, yeah, this is a way better thing than doing nothing. And then you learn, oh, actually, instead of calling your mother, you have this awesome opportunity. You won't call your mother, but you get to save 100 people's lives. You're like, oh, that's way better. But I'm going to do nothing instead of it, because even though I was going to call my mother instead of doing nothing, now that I learned that I have the option to do something way better than calling my mother, well, I'll do nothing instead of that because I don't have a preference between those two. That seems really weird.
So I think the way to resolve this is that like we don't face these like pairwise choices in this case. I think like if I foresee that I actually just do have these three options on the table, I don't have this formally worked out yet. I think it could be pretty good to do so, but actually, never mind. Okay, so this does follow from the formal rule I'm thinking about. So it seems that even if B and C are like incomparable just in this like pairwise comparison, it doesn't follow that, all things considered, when I'm like choosing among these three options, that choosing B is permissible. I think what happens.
I didn't think I explained it well, but I wasn't imagining that it's like a three-way pairwise comparison. What I was imagining was, so it's like you're driving on the way to press a button rather than doing nothing, and at first you thought that the button would sort of like enable you to call your mother. Um,
Mhm.
And then you learn, wait, no, that button doesn't enable me to call my mother. It enables me to save 100 people. And you're like, wow, that's way better. But now I'll do nothing instead of it. Because, so I'm not
I'm not
imagining.
suggesting you do nothing. So I'm saying that my choice rule would say, since B is dominated by A, all things considered, and A is also dominated by C,
No, but A is no
then
longer an option. You no longer can do A. You thought you could do A, and then you were, no, I don't have the option to do A. I only have the option to do B and C.
oh, I mean, I think if it seems perfectly natural to me that if you truly only do have these two options, and they're incomparable, then that's that. Like this,
Well, I
like
agree.
it seems like the intuition you're
Sorry,
pumping is, like you're pumping
sorry.
the intuition that like when we have these. Sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
So, like, why this verdict of I can just do nothing, or I could just as well do nothing as saving 100 sounds weird. Is that we're putting this in the context of this other option? But if that's the case, then my choice rule would say that saving 100 is the uniquely permissible option.
Yeah.
In this example.
Sorry. So I'm imagining that I'm imagining the way it works is first you thought that you were choosing between A and C, and then you learn that no, you're choosing between. Or sorry, first you thought you were choosing between A and B, between calling your mother and doing nothing, and then you learn no, actually you're deciding between B and C, and so you're like, wow, the thing I'm choosing against B is way better than I thought, but nonetheless now I get to choose B when I wouldn't have otherwise. That strikes me as very, very strange.
Okay, yeah, I agree. That's pretty strange when you frame it like that.
It's like it shouldn't be that you're like an action gets better, and yet now it's like easier. It's like before you were definitely going to pick one action over another action. And then the action that you were going to pick gets way better, and then you're like, well, now I get to pick the other option. That seems so weird to me.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I can see how this is weird. It seems less weird to me when, we're not thinking of it in terms of like betterness here. It's like choice worthiness, which is going to just depend on what options are available to you. And so if my reasoning is like, were I choosing just between A and C, I would prefer C. Therefore, like in some sense, like A has been replaced with something better than that in this new situation where I'm just choosing between B and C. If that's the reasoning, I think we're just maybe just like porting intuitions about betterness into choice worthiness where it doesn't necessarily belong.
To me, it seems like the principle holds with choice worthiness. It's like you learn that an action is way more. It's like there's an action that you are going to take over another action. Then you learn it's way more choice worthy than you thought. It's like now if you were choosing between it after you learn its new state versus it before you chose it in its old state, you'd like snap off it in its new state in a heartbeat. It's like way better, way more choice worthy. And then you're like, okay, but now I'll choose to do nothing instead of it after learning that it's much more choice worthy. That seems very strange. I don't know how much more progress we'll make on this specific issue. Like I guess you can bite the bullet certainly, but it seems bad to me.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I should say here is I'm not sure how you, um, like when making decision making under normative uncertainty generally, I'm not sure how you avoid infectious incomparability without sort of ad hoc, to me, ad hoc, like reducing our credence in incomparability below some threshold. So as far as I'm aware, the only uh, choice rules under normative uncertainty that avoid um, infectious incomparability without having the kinds of properties of the rule I'm describing uh, is some like modification of maximizing expected choice worthiness, where you first of all you generalize it to like um, situations of incomparability by like taking the set of all uh, ways of making these orderings complete, um, and then you do some variance normalization magic, and this only avoids infectious incomparability if your kind of metanormative credence on the views that give you incomparability is like less than 0.5. Um, I think if when we're just looking at the principles that kind of um, yeah, when we're looking at what epistemic principles are sensible and what axiologies are sensible, and we kind of combine these and um, end up with incomparability, both from like extremely compelling starting points. Maybe that part I still have to say more on, but if there are these strong independent motivations for the view that gives you incomparability, I would think it's ad hoc to kind of put low credence on them anyway to escape infectiousness.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
now,
I guess. Oh, sorry.
now maybe yeah, I guess you'd say like you just like don't find the independent motivations for views of incomparability strong enough that this would apply to you. Hopefully, in the rest of the conversation, we can get into that. But
Yeah, I don't find there to be very strong arguments for incomparability.
yeah,
And
so I mean,
but so just to so I guess my view on normative uncertainty is I don't think there is a formula of doing normative uncertainty. Like I don't think that there's some like framework that you like can add up the reasons on different sides, and because I just think they're mostly dealing in incommensurable units. I think of
yeah,
incommensurability a lot like priors, where it's like, or sorry, I think of moral uncertainty as a lot like priors, where it's like there are some cases where even if an act is worse on one theory, where it's just clearly better overall. Like for example, if you have low credence in extreme deontology and very high credence in consequentialism, and you can tell one lie to like prevent infinite children from being tortured. It seems really obvious that in that case you should tell the lie.
mm-hmm.
So my view is that I don't think there's a formula of how to do it, like generally, but I think that there are specific judgments, just like there's no formula from which you can get priors, but are facts about which priors are reasonable and which ones are unreasonable.
Right. I think then you still kind of have to answer the question of how you avoid infectious incomparability insofar as you put weight on the views that posit incomparability. But I think it would be most productive for the rest of the conversation to get into the independent motivations for incomparability a bit more. Yeah, because
can I just say like one?
Yeah.
Can I just say like one or two sentences about that? Yeah. So
yeah,
I agree. It'll be a puzzle. I guess I think this puzzle it'll look. There are like lots of other cases where views will there's some chance of a moral theory that has absurd consequences, and so I basically think like if you think of a moral theory as really unlikely and it would have absurd consequences if true, you don't get to like entirely ignore it, but you should like you sort of get to mostly ignore it if you have a low credence in it. Because remember I don't think there's a formula of how to do it. So if a moral theory tells me silly things and I have a low credence in it, I think like the other moral theories are telling me more important things about whether the action should be taken. But yeah, let's talk about the case for incomparability.
Yeah. I mean, I think so the intuition. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of echo here.
Oh, sorry.
Is that? Let's see if that works. Okay, nice. Yeah. So for me, I think like just an important intuition here is just how extremely far-reaching like an impartial consequentialist view is. Like we're dealing with consequences that are echoing out from post-superintelligence civilization. These are like minds that could be like alien to us in many ways, like totally unprecedented technology in many ways, interactions with like potential extraterrestrial civilizations eventually, for all we know. Even just going that far, maybe you can go further on the Train to Crazy Town with a causal decision theory stuff. But even just this far, I do think it should not be that surprising a priori for us to get like super widespread incomparability with respect to impartial consequentialism, because like we are plausibly missing just like the vast bulk of possible consequences of our actions. Missing in the sense that they're not even in our hypothesis space that we're like putting credences over. They're in this like blob of everything else I didn't think of, or like potential fine-grained statements of these super coarse-grained possible outcomes we have in mind when forecasting the future. This is just a preliminary like statement. I think there's this is not meant to be self-contained, but I'm curious if you like disagree this far that the total value across the cosmos is something that in some sense should be pretty surprising if we can get that much precision on in our EV estimates.
I don't think it's that surprising. So, I mean, there are lots of cases where I think we're not totally in the dark, even when we're making decisions about things that we don't know about. So, like for example, several years ago, I was making a decision about which college to go to, and there were some considerations I took into account, but like all sorts of things, that ended up being hugely relevant. I ended up not. They didn't occur to me. And you could imagine magnifying this, so you could imagine that college would last like 1,000 years or something. So it's like there's way more things. I think this lowers our confidence. The more stuff there is that we don't know about, it should lower our confidence that we are in fact right. But it doesn't make it so that actions don't have very high expected values, and it doesn't tell us that we're totally in the dark. And this, I think that incomparability often, the arguments for it often result in sliding between, there's huge amounts of uncertainty and even like uncertainty about the stuff we're uncertain about, and assuming that implies that we're just totally in the dark about the expected values of things, which I think is wrong.
Well, I don't think it's an assumption. So let's step back to just imprecision itself. So like what is your precise probability that I don't know, like if you started working at Anthropic and some particular team there, that this would like decrease existential risk. or sorry, maybe that's ill-defined because X risk is a probability itself. That probability that this would prevent an extinction event that would have otherwise occurred.
Um. Well, are you like taking into account like uncertain ripple effects from like just changing the identities of future people? Because then I think the odds that it's just like any action has a non-trivial chance of affecting whether or not humans go extinct. So then I'd say maybe, I don't know, like 10%. And if I were making really important decisions on this basis, I would like think very carefully about it. So right now, this is sort of a rough number pulled out of my ass, but it's like if I had to make big decisions, I'd have to like, I'd want to make them come up with a more precise number.
Yeah, I guess I'm, from my experience working in long-termist AI safety, like, and having several years to reflect on these ass numbers, I've not found that you can get much more precision out of them at all. There's, you like have this pretty coarse-grained model of I don't know, like if I develop this particular technical intervention for alignment, if it's like implemented as intended, maybe this like ends up preventing some misalignment scenario. But then I have to ask, what's the counterfactual of what this lab would have otherwise done? Could this have been better than what I'm recommending? Especially given that like I'm trying to intervene on the alignment of superintelligence that seems like vastly more complex than the kind of like a toy model I could write down. Very plausible that like given how limited my understanding is, I am not just like very uncertain about like whether me pushing for this technical intervention is going to prevent misalignment. It's more that I like it's an arbitrary call whether I say if this is more likely to prevent the misalignment scenario than the counterfactual thing the lab would have done. Especially the counterfactual of maybe they would have paid more, been more willing to take some safety measure that someone else recommended, but now they've like spent more of their goodwill to the doomers or something.
I mean, maybe
I think this can go on.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is like highly uncertain. I guess I don't see a reason to think like the fact that you can come up with a bunch of scenarios for how it might go well and a bunch of scenarios for how it might go wrong. That doesn't automatically imply that it's incomparable.
I don't think it automatically does. That's right.
Yeah, but I don't. I guess I think, yeah, there are like ways it could go right, ways it could go wrong. To me, it sounded like the ways it could go right are sort of like more significant overall than the ways it could go wrong. And there have been like various times over the years when there have been research questions that I've spent a lot of time reading and thinking about. And normally I feel like I can get at least a sense of like, I can have some idea. Like for example, I did a kind of long, I did a lot of reading about the human long-term impact on wild animal populations. And I basically think it's pretty clear that humans will, barring like space colonization and abiogenesis, barring these sci-fi things, that the long-term human impact on wild animal populations will lower them in expectation, even though there are lots of ways that we raise them, especially long-term, and there's lots of uncertainty. But I don't see the fact that you can come up with lots of ways it could go well, lots of ways it could go badly. I don't see a reason to think it's incomparable. Like, yes, this is what makes it a hard problem, but I don't think not all hard problems are things we're just totally in the dark about or have imprecise credences concerning.
I agree with that claim as stated, but I'm just not sure where these relative weights on the like good outcomes versus bad outcomes of the intervention are coming from exactly,
I don't
especially
know.
in AI.
You
Like in
think
AI
about them
safety.
really hard. Try to come up with something.
Uh, yes, but you're thinking very hard about, especially in the technical AI safety or setting. Drop technical, just in the AI safety domain, especially. You're dealing with um, this just pretty radically unprecedented kind of event, um, and also where like the feedback loops on the actual risk in hand are rather poor. People can argue you can get feedback loops on misalignment of current AIs, let's say, but then many others working in the space will say this is just extremely uninformative or outright misleading because the post superintelligence things shift in distribution, or they're just like different mechanisms at play. And that seems like plausible to me on its face. I think the broader point is that, like, yeah, when you have extremely poor or non-existent feedback loops to work with, a rather unprecedented problem, um, one where like we've already surfaced several like crucial considerations about potential backfire risks, um, which should suggest to us we should continue to discover such things. Also discover some unintended positive effects, to be clear. But these things combined suggest to me that I just have like I don't think the degree of precision with which my intuitions are tracking the impact in some sense are. I don't think this degree of precision is high enough to get me to this action is like more likely to prevent extinction than the other.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't see how this is supposed to be different from other actions that we think that you have a reason to take. Like we agree that what do you make of the college case where, like, when I was deciding between colleges, there were so many factors that just never would have occurred to me, like people who I would have never met and so on. It's like it's no surprise that there are lots of considerations that I wasn't aware of. That doesn't mean I was totally in the dark. And I would guess that if you just like looked in the aggregate at whether people tend to, when deciding between two schools, tend to make the better choice, at least in terms of just their well-being, my guess would be they do with more than 50% probability.
I'm not sure. I mean, we don't ever really observe the counterfactual in these cases, for one thing. It does seem intuitive that we like, we have reasons for our preferences of like college choice, for example. I think in that case, what I'd say is the factors that seem to plausibly like dominate your well-being, let's say, these aren't super exotic. Like you can think ex post, you can realize ex post some considerations that didn't occur to you, but whether it seems like either two things, either like ex post you like seem to judge that these considerations didn't make that much of a difference to the bottom line anyway, in which case the the degree of like imprecision in the estimates you were warranted in the first place just wasn't that high. Or maybe after like looking through the college choice case carefully, you find, oh yeah, this was sensitive to lots of things, and my perception that this choice was like better in some sense than what I could have otherwise done is actually just kind of an illusion of control or something. I'm open to that possibility. I think it's I don't think it's not the hill one has to die on here, because this again is like such a relatively familiar to humans situation. You have a pretty good grasp on, or relatively good grasp on things that are like good for your mental health and physical health and social health, etc. Compared to what's going to govern, you know, take over by ASI or by like bad human actors controlling ASI, etc.
Yeah, I guess I think I agree. Like, certainly, I would expect accuracy in the college choice and in the other choice. But my thought is just what this illustrates is that even when there are tons of things you don't know about, even when there are things where like they're kind of imprecise, that you're not just totally in the dark about whether some action's better than another action. Like if you ask like, oh, you know, what was the probability conditional on, like, you know, I was deciding between Michigan and Berkeley. Like, conditional on Berkeley, like what was the odds I would have like studied abroad? Like there are a whole range of factors that are like very, very difficult to compare, but nonetheless we can make some sorts of ideas. I don't claim it's certainly coherent to imagine that that we're not clueless about college, but we are clueless about things that are much harder to get our heads around. But I guess I'd want to say I think that's sort of like the model where it's like just because you have tons and tons of uncertainty about some domain, that doesn't like it can still be that you have good reason that you're not clueless about which things turn out for the best, and that's kind of what I think here. I do want to kind of wrap things up. I want to go get lunch, but if you have any last things to say, you know, feel free to say them. I'll give you the last word, unless. Though I normally I say that I'll give people the last word, but then they say something that goads me, and then I respond. But then I try to give them the last word after that. So if you have anything you want to say, so just know maybe I might be goaded. You know, I'm easily goaded into giving a response.
That's fair. Yeah. Gosh, I mean, I think my last word should be, I do think this is just a really thorny topic that takes, in my experience, like coming around to this view, took like a lot of thinking through various details to kind of find more intuitive and just like ultimately find compelling, coming from the starting point of something like precise Bayesianism. So I would encourage, you know, listeners who are interested in this topic to read my posts on the A forum about precise Bayesianism and unawareness. I think just seeing the full case and carefully considering the, you know, epistemology and the empirical factors is pretty important here. And there's a lot I wasn't able to say, but anyway, also I should say that, yeah, this has been fun. And I will say, again, the cases about the reflection principle and plausibly about the calling your mother case, I do think these are like relatively sensible objections to the kind of view I'm advocating.
Yeah, okay, I made sensible.
Much more than what I'm used to, so I appreciated that.
Yeah, and I also found your arguments sensible. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I think this has been a very interesting chat. And certainly I think cluelessness is like an important and interesting subject to think through. And I think a lot of people end up sort of implicitly thinking that cluelessness is right without actually like a thing that you'll have people say is they'll be like, when you make an argument for something, they'll just sort of vaguely gesture in the direction of how much uncertainty we have about it. And so they're sort of assuming cluelessness. So I agree, like people, they should try to think through this issue rigorously, but considering the arguments for cluelessness and the arguments against. Obviously, I think cluelessness, you know, isn't right, but so to be clear, I was saying, obviously, it is the case that I don't think it's right. I think it's obviously not right.
Yeah.
But I share your assessment that it's an important subject to think through. So yeah, I guess people can, if people read more of your stuff, you have a forum account where you write things.
That's the best resource on this topic. Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks so much for coming on. Yeah, have a nice rest of your day. I guess I'll end the recording.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.